So have you noticed that for a long time, at least a decade, maybe two, things kind of seem like they suck and they're depressing and there's kind of like a meh feeling about the future? Why is that? Well, I think it's because Western civilization has adopted the concept of managed decline, which I'm going to talk about. And I think we may be at a turning point. We'll see how that goes. So, what is managed decline? Well, it's when powers that be decide that certain trend lines are heading downward in an irreversible manner, and that even trying to counteract the trends is just completely futile. And so then the only course forward is to accept the decline and attempt to manage its impact. So you're basically going to crash. Uh, you're getting ahead of it so you can mitigate what the crash looks like. Now, this strategy is often adopted by private business when they realize that they have to contract, but it's also something that could be adopted by a government. And I believe Western Europe, for the most part, with a few exceptions, has completely embraced this model, and the United States was in the process of embracing it. So, managed decline is a good thing if the negative trends are truly out of your hands. It's a good way to keep the organization alive in hopes that some opportunity is going to present itself down the road. However, two problems generally occur. The first is the process demoralizes everybody in the organization, or country in this case. Planning for things to get worse with no plans for things to get better tends to be a self fulfilling prophecy. If the organization isn't planning for the future, the culture of the organization becomes depressed and worse, accepting. Part of managed decline is deciding the core values or products that must be continued until the end, no matter what. But what happens if the company or government picks the wrong core? You may then miss the opportunity for rebirth down the line. uh, Whereas if you'd picked something else to defend, you might be in a better position to. Now, the global order of the West has fallen into managed decline, in my opinion. It's not the original goal of the global order to decline. It's that they have picked core values that, when prioritized, causes negative trends, and the refusal to move from these core values forces the choice of managed decline to support them. Uh, or in other words, when I talk about the global order, I'm talking about going from a family of nations to basically global organizations attempting to manage things, and essentially that they've picked the wrong values, and now they're treating these values as core values, and they can't make them work. Since they can't make them work, they're going, well, if we stick with these core values, we're going down. So it's time to manage the decline. Now, managed decline is worse for Europe because the initial goal of the global order was to strip Europe of its ability to wage offensive war. It was to make their militaries completely dependent on the US so that the US could dictate security protocols. So, having an army that's too weak to go abroad and requiring the permission to do anything outside your own borders tends to make a culture inward looking. If you're not projecting outward, you have to look inward. Over time, it makes them irresponsible. If they don't have to defend themselves and they are expecting other people to do it for them, you're talking about a very basic human value. If you give up on the idea that defending yourself is your responsibility and that it belongs to somebody else, uh, it very much diminishes you. So, for the Western Europe, when an adversary approaches their border, they don't rally to the cause of defending themselves. They say, where's the United States? Now, people who have lapsed into a state where they can't even imagine defending themselves look for other responsibilities to shed as well. They come up with the ideas of that, well, someone should take care of my health care. Someone should be tending my parents for me when they get old. Somebody should be taking care of my children for me. Children are a lot of work. Eventually, a combination of total irresponsibility coupled with managed decline makes some people say, why should I care about the future? I only live in the now. These people stop having children. And we can see this has happened throughout Europe. They're essentially in the middle of a population death spiral. Some countries, like Spain and Germany, probably will never recover from it. How does someone with the managed decline mindset appear to be handling this? Well, in terms of Europe, they basically look at and to a lesser extent the United States because it was coming here. But anyways, so they look at it and say, well, there's nothing we can do to reverse the population decline. And they decided that social programs are more about their identity than anything else that actually comes from their original culture. So it gets to the point where they look at maintaining these social programs at all costs. They become the core values. In order to keep these core values alive with a declining population, they decide that they need to bring in the migrants to man the bedpans as the population ages and dies, and to generate the taxes to protect the social programs. So you get a country like Britain that basically says, well, the National Health Organization, I can't remember their exact acronym again now, but essentially, their national socialized healthcare system is more important to them than being British. They're basically saying that everything about them, their language, their history, their cultural icons, are worth giving up in order to protect national health care. It's literally what they're doing over there. And not just national health care. They have other social bugaboos that they're hung up on. But this is essentially what's happening. It's better to die out as a nation in order to protect national health care. Sounds absolutely crazy, but that's what seems to be happening. So people without a sense of future look for dopamine hits in obscure sex kinks, garbage food, alcohol, and drugs. Why be an engineer to plan for the future when the future ends with you? They scoff at the idea of flying cars and try to replace them with electric cars that'll keep you within 100 miles of home. They can no longer imagine great leaps forward because they're already planning for an end at some future. We don't know the date, but they know what it's going to look like. So, in many ways, they're like neo-Luddites. The stars are okay to look at, but don't think of reaching for them, like this clown depicted here. Honestly said that the idea of trying to colonize the solar system is impossible, shouldn't even be attempted. Yeah. They've become lobster people. They are there to keep you in the bucket and pull you down. The only thing they hate more than their constrained lives is somebody else trying to escape to a better way. Now, that's some bleak stuff. But I do think we might be on the verge of turning the corner. It's not an absolute, because history is a weird thing. So, Trump's election is backed by a mindset that everything before really wasn't working. Now, people may not have a specific idea in mind what isn't working, but it doesn't seem to be right. And I'm believing that managerial decline mindset is what's been tipping people to go, I don't feel optimistic. I don't like this anymore. This isn't any fun. Now, I'm not pinning all my hopes on Trump. I saw what he did in his first term, and I was, although a few good things in terms of the economy, I was underwhelmed in terms of structural change. However, it's a fact that if we are looking at the managed decline way of life, and I do believe the previous administration, I mean, if Biden wasn't managed decline, I don't know what was. And then when Harris stepped up, basically shrugged her shoulders and said, there's literally nothing we should do different. I would say this election was a huge rejection of management or managed decline. There are whole cadres of people who built messages for this campaign in opposition to the idea that there's just no way to make things better. Saying things that were once out of bounds is no longer being shut down, but now must be verbally engaged. We are seeing things being questioned. Why aren't NATO countries paying to defend themselves? Why does NATO exist at all? Is the current global order needed at all, or do we have to have do we need an alternative? What's wrong with having a national culture? I think these are important questions, and the fact that we can now ask them when 5 years ago these were kind of considered verboten, I think is a good sign. Why are we stuck with these outdated and non functioning government programs? Why do we tolerate a national bureaucracy that protects itself at the expense of the people? Must we rely on mass immigration for future growth? Are there ways we can forge ahead with new ways to produce power? Trump has suggested at one point that we actually take federal land and use it to build futuristic cities where people would come up with concepts and the winners would be allowed to build them. The idea of even freeing up government land, which the government has basically kept locked up in its fist and hasn't released a single acre in forever, says a lot right there. Even though it hasn't happened, the fact that it's even being questioned or brought up is big. By the way, I have a video talking about Trump's futuristic cities. It's kind of interesting. It's actual proposal he made. Um, Trump talks about upending the global order and creating new security arrangements that aren't solely at our expense and for the benefit of the global order, but for our benefit. And he speaks the blasphemy of suggesting that the United States might actually do some kind of peaceful expansion. Note Greenland and Panama. Now, I don't think he actually wants to uh, annex them in any way. I do think they're negotiating points, but the fact that he even talks about that when it's been essentially global gospel that borders don't change. He speaks about going to the moon to stay. Uh, Current efforts to put astronauts on the moon are left over from his previous administration. At the same time, uh, his ally, Elon Musk, is looking at building cars that no one said could be built, everyone said couldn't be built. He's flying unthought numbers of satellite in massive constellations around the Earth. Rocket launches had doubled in under 6 years. Currently, on any given day, there's a 65% chance that there's a rocket launching. This is unheard of. And now we speak about going to Mars to actually protect humanity from extinction. Now, these things may not be completely in our grasp. They might be too technologically unfeasible at this time, but you never get to those things unless you begin the conversation of talking about them. And the fact that I hear a change in the conversation, I think is very important. And who knows? Maybe we follow in the footsteps of those conversations. Maybe they bring us off our planet to other planets. Maybe they get us flying cars. Maybe they set up an order for the world that works better than the one it is now and is better for our national prosperity. All right, in the comment section below, have you heard of managed decline before? Do you think At least Western Europe has been embracing managed decline, and do you think the United States was beginning to? Do you agree with that thesis? If not, tell me what you're thinking. Please smash the like button. If the YouTube algorithm has brought you here and you're not a regular subscriber, check out my other titles. I get into a lot of stuff. You'll find something you like. Please subscribe. And also, if you know someone who might find this interesting, please share it with them. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.